Hello and welcome to Teaching Writing in College, where the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? And I'm glad to have you along for this episode. I've decided to title this episode Summer Reflection Series Episode 2, AI has a context problem. And so I'd like to go through that just a little bit for some things that I've noticed about artificial intelligence when it comes to writing. And so that's what this one is about. And I get to reflect a little bit along the way. Previous episode, you might remember, I talked about accomplished novice-ship. So an accomplished novice is not a complete novice and not a full expert with nothing more to learn. And so teachers, just like students, can benefit from having that kind of a mindset where they recognize that they do have some kind of experience they can draw from, but they're also not a full expert, and so there's more to learn. And so I found that to be really useful for me, and hopefully some of that comes out here because I'm not a complete expert on everything, but I do have some experience to draw from. And then expertise, an important part of expertise, I think I also covered last time, is that it does give one the capability of noticing things. That's one of the hallmarks of expertise, is experts will notice patterns in ways that novices won't, or lay people won't. And so that's important. It doesn't matter what kind of activity that is. For us it's teaching, but it could be something like reading x-rays or tying knots or any number of other things. Just about anything that we do, there are going to be people who have a lot of experience, a lot of expertise, and they will notice patterns that other people won't. So that's an important thing to keep in mind here as well. And so for this episode, just a few things to kind of set it up. One is that AI has forced teachers in higher ed and everywhere else to think carefully about students or student learning. So when I say everywhere else, I guess I mean in education, but it really kind of in some ways has felt disruptive, and it still is disruptive. And it can also be kind of disconcerting. And I will admit that as I was preparing this episode, sometimes I felt just a little bit disconcerted by what I thought I might be saying or whether I was right about something or not. But I'm going to go ahead and lay it all out in this episode. And so right now that's, I think kind of my lack of experience, lack of expertise playing a role. And even though I do have some experience with it, I'm still kind of thinking through the implications of using AI for students and teaching with it and so on and so forth. And so I don't feel comfortable all the time when it comes to AI, even though we've been working with it for a few years now. I did notice, though, just on the expertise side, I noticed something about writing that pertains to the relationship between teaching and AI as part of the writing ecosystem we now live in, and I'd like to share that. I'd like to share that in the form of just some writing that I did versus some writing that I had ChatGPT do, and I'm going to compare those two here in just a few minutes. But since AI is part of the ecosystem, we always have to think about how it might be used as a tool or how it might be misused and so on. So what we want to do is just kind of look at some of the potential limits of this tool. Hence, AI has a context problem. So we'll get to that. And part of that is it's going to have to do with my kitchen. I'm going to give you a tour of my kitchen where I'm going to give you just a brief video clip of my kitchen so you can see what it looks like, and also a description that I wrote. And then this last bullet point here on the screen is kind of tongue-in-cheek. Moreover, I'll ask AI to delve into my kitchen. And so there's my joke for the day. Delve. I still think of AI every time I see that word. Every time I see a transition with moreover, I also think of AI. I think it uses that word quite a bit as well. But, or at least one of the chatbots does. But I feel like I see moreover quite a bit more than I used to. So let's see. Also, just to set this up, a small piece of writing expertise. So this is something that expertise about writing that I like to share with students. I think it's a really great skill to have because it can work across a lot of different genres, a lot of different contexts, and that it's a conceptual bit of knowledge about writing called presence from Chaim Perelman. This may be familiar to you, which basically just means a selection of details and use of concrete sensory language to make something that is absent seem present. Something that's not there. If we are writing about something and that thing is not there where we can see it, we want to use words to try to make it seen, make it so that somebody can imagine it, make them feel like it's there with them, make the audience feel like it's there with them. So that's an important thing that I like to use it in a lot of my classes with students. And also the ladder of abstraction. I've seen this in a couple of different textbooks, possibly by a couple of different names, but the ladder of abstraction, it just indicates the levels of abstractness or concreteness in language. And so a word like timepiece is pretty abstract. There could be lots of different kinds of things that can tell time, but gunmetal Seiko wristwatch with a bracelet, watch band, and a navy blue face, which kind of describes a watch that I have, that's much more concrete, much easier to imagine. And so this is just part of a background. These are skills that I like to have students practice, and I like to have them think about how they might use it in other places besides the classroom, because descriptive language on its own isn't really worth very much unless there's an audience, or sometimes even a lack of descriptive language. When you think about presence or the ladder of abstraction, there would be cases where maybe somebody wants to make something seem like it's not so present, or they want to gloss over it a little bit, maybe sometimes accidentally, but maybe also sometimes purposefully. And so I think I have a slide a little bit later where we can get to that. One that's coming to mind for me right now, a situation for that might be maybe in a courtroom. If a lawyer is arguing in front of a judge and maybe they don't want to help something seem so present, they might gloss over it, or they might select certain details but leave other details out entirely. Kind of a familiar game that we play with writing and argument all the time, but the name for that is presence. Or they might, describe something in lots of detail, or they might really kind of gloss over something in terms of the way that they talk about it. They might make it seem more abstract, if they want the audience to pay less attention. So anyway, presence and ladder of abstraction. But I'm just reading down further on my slide here. So making decisions about details, of course. Radio ads and memoirs, those were a couple of other places where I thought, just off the top of my head, where presence or the ladder of abstraction might be useful. And also helping readers imagine problems or scenarios, making things seem real through language, really important. I also think about proposals and using presence a lot in those. So anyway, here's a quick visual tour of my kitchen, and then we'll talk about my own description and ChatGPT. All right, here's a quick tour of the kitchen. We've got the stools there. This is a galley kitchen. And we've got our little family whiteboard there. It's in between two different parts of the house. And then on this side, we've got the countertops. They look like this with the specks and the streaks. There we've got the cabinets, which were painted. We had them painted when we moved in. Pretty typical kitchen, I guess. There's the backsplash right there, and more storage space, and a little pantry right there. And then over here, we've got some appliances, more backsplash. See the color coordination there. And I'm just kind of backing up from the way I came. And there we have it. We have a Phoenix Mercury calendar right there, a game calendar. And that's basically it. All right. So my own description. You've seen my kitchen. And if I were just to describe it, maybe even just as a classroom exercise, if I'm starting out with students with these ideas of presence and of the ladder of abstraction, I might just have them do just an activity like this, not necessarily with any particular audience in mind, but just to get the feel for, using really concrete language and trying to give the reader a chance to imagine what they're seeing or what the writer would like them to see. So I'll just read through this. My house has a galley kitchen, an open kitchen that runs between our family room and our living room. The most noticeable feature might be the gray granite countertops with black and dark red specks of color, full bullnose edges, and rounded corners. We installed them when we bought our home in 2014 to replace the original wood-patterned Formica ones. Our kitchen also sports the original cabinetry, though we had it painted white when we replaced the countertops. We also installed the nickel-brushed cabinetry hardware, as the cabinets originally did not have handles. Our refrigerator, which we brought with us from our previous home, has a simple brushed nickel exterior with the water dispenser inside the door. When we moved in, the original General Electric stove with coil burners was aging and the microwave did not work, so we replaced them with new brushed nickel ones to match our fridge. The backsplash consists of small rectangular tiles in black, white, and various shades of gray that match the countertops, cabinets, and appliances. It was installed courtesy of my father-in-law, who has generously shared his expertise, craftsmanship, and labor over the years. All right, so just to go back to the use of these skills, just because I was kind of dwelling on them, I think, a little bit of a side note, I guess, for this podcast, but how might I use a real-world description of my kitchen? There are different ways to do it, and I'd have to really adjust the description based on what I want to use it for. So for presence in writing, once again, the selection of highly descriptive details to guide the audience's attention. So in a family history, if I want to capture daily life for my audience, which might primarily be my spouse, my children, maybe some other close relatives, I might emphasize certain things over others. I mentioned, that my father-in-law had installed the backsplash, and so I could kind of head in that direction with it. In a description of the home, if I were trying to sell it, it might look a bit different, and it might be shorter, kind of depending on, what people do when they are describing homes as they try to sell them. And so I'd have to go back and look at examples of that and then adjust accordingly. But the adjustments, depending on the purpose, context, and genre, should I focus on the air fryer and the treats my family has enjoyed over the years? The kids are getting tall enough and strong enough to get water from the dispenser inside the fridge. It's kind of been fun to watch them grow, and learn to do that themselves over time, which we're kind of getting to the end of that phase in my family. The color coordination between the backsplash, cabinetry, appliances, and countertops. So there are lots of different things that I could emphasize or de-emphasize or include or leave out. And of course, there are many more. But different ways to think about that description of my kitchen. And so the next question becomes, what happens when we ask AI to describe my kitchen? And so here's what I got. I went out to ChatGPT and I just wrote the instructions, describe my kitchen. And so ChatGPT recognized that it needed some details. And so it says, sure, but I'll need a bit of help first. Could you describe your kitchen to me? For example, you might include the layout, examples, galley, is it L-shaped, is it an open plan, colors of cabinets, countertops, and walls, flooring material, appliances and fixtures, lighting and windows, any personal touches. And once I have that, I can give you a descriptive paragraph. And so I responded with, just some of the basic details. It's a galley kitchen. It's got gray countertops, white cabinets, not many walls, white tile with manufactured scuffed patterns. So it's got kind of a wear pattern on the tiles. Metal colored stove, fridge, and microwave. And ChatGPT says, thanks. Here's a descriptive paragraph of your kitchen based on what you shared. And so I'll read this. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Your kitchen is a streamlined galley-style space, efficient and modern in its design. White cabinets line both sides, their clean surfaces reflecting the soft light that filters through the open layout. The gray countertops provide a cool, neutral contrast, lending a touch of understated elegance. With few walls to enclose it, the kitchen feels airy and connected to the rest of the home. The floor is tiled in white, subtly patterned with manufactured scuffs that give it a lived-in, textured appearance without feeling worn. Stainless steel appliances, a stove, refrigerator, and microwave add a metallic sheen, echoing the modern aesthetic and completing the kitchen's crisp, functional vibe. So one thing that I think ChatGPT does or did do with this is it spent a little bit of time trying to give it some presence, and it also tried to describe it, and it also and it used the data that I gave it, and then it also added some of its own details to try to make it more believable maybe. But things like the kitchen's crisp functional vibe, words like vibe or understated elegance or things of that nature, it's trying to add some things to that. But what it still doesn't really do is it doesn't describe my kitchen in too much detail. And so, if I really wanted to get at it, I would need to add the details that I had in my own, just to help ChatGPT understand what or how the kitchen should be described and what's in it. And then it gives me another question here. Would you like a cozier version or something more minimalist or poetic? And so I responded with, this house has been lived in by children for the past 13 years. The kitchen isn't so clean and shiny. Could you rewrite it to reflect that? And so ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's a revised version that reflects the wear and warmth of a family kitchen lived in for over a decade. And it says, your kitchen is a well-worn galley shaped by 13 years of family life. The white cabinets, once crisp, now carry the marks of daily use. A nick here, a sticky handle there, small reminders of countless hurried mornings and late-night snacks. The gray countertops are dotted with faint stains and scratches that speak to years of homework sessions, science projects, and birthday cake prep. With few walls to separate it from the rest of the house, the space feels open and familiar, a thoroughfare for kids running through or pausing to raid the fridge. The white tile floor, patterned with manufactured scuffs, blends seamlessly with real ones, a history of dropped spoons, muddy shoes, and the occasional spilled juice box. Stainless steel appliances, a stove, a fridge, and a microwave have dulled slightly over time, but they hum along reliably, steady companions in a kitchen that's less about perfection and more about presence. So maybe a couple of quick observations here. One thing it seems to be doing is it seems to be ascribing maybe a little bit of purpose there at the end. It's less about perfection and more about presence. And so maybe it's trying to give my kitchen a down home kind of feel. A thoroughfare for kids running through or pausing to raid the fridge. And that is true of my kitchen. And that's kind of the way it feels when I'm standing in it sometimes. But that could be said of probably any galley kitchen if there's a home where kids are. And so, it's not really specific to my fridge or my kitchen. It is, something that's a little bit more general. It's a detail that could describe a lot of different galley kitchens. And it turns out, I don't think it knew this. I didn't tell it that there are dots on my countertop, but faint stains and scratches that speak to years of homework sessions. That word dotted, I'm not sure that if there's a stain, I don't think the stain would be dotted. If something spilled and there's some kind of stain or something, I don't think dotted is the word that I would use for that. And birthday cake prep, I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. I'm not sure that I can accept that description of it. It doesn't sound like the word dotted works well with some of the things that it describes later, like the faint stains and scratches that speak to years of homework sessions, science projects, and birthday cake prep. But then afterward, ChatGPT asks, would you like to add specific details like a breakfast table, drawings on the fridge, or a junk drawer? Once again, these are all things that happen in a lot of kitchens, or that lots of kitchens have. And so I said, can you be more specific about the snacks and hurried mornings? Certainly, here's a more specific and vivid version that brings those moments to life. Your kitchen is a galley-style space worn in all the right ways, the kind of wear that only comes from 13 years of real family living. The white cabinets are dotted with fingerprints and faint smudges where little hands once tugged them open looking for crackers or granola bars. One drawer never quite closes right thanks to a toddler's enthusiastic climb during the fruit snack era. The gray countertops have hosted 1,000 moments. Peanut butter toast thrown together during a frantic Monday morning rush, lunch boxes half packed while someone yells about missing homework, and cereal bowls left behind mid-sprint to catch the bus. With no walls to close it in, the kitchen feels more like a hallway of activity, passed through, leaned against, lived in. The white tile floor, already patterned with factory scuffs, carries its own history now. Scratch marks from chair legs dragged too hard, a faint pink stain from that one time the strawberry smoothie exploded. The metal-toned appliances, the stove, the microwave, the fridge, are dotted with magnets, reminders, and the occasional science fair flyer, still working like champs despite the occasional slamming and spills. It's not shiny, but it's solid, the kind of kitchen that remembers everything. Here we have maybe, once again, it seems like it's trying harder to be specific and vivid. It wants to try to bring moments to life. And just a couple of things that I've noticed here. The white cabinets are dotted with fingerprints and faint smudges where little hands once tugged them open looking for crackers or granola bars. And so that makes it sound like, the child has grown, but the smudges have been there for a long time. They once tugged them. And we do like to clean our kitchen a little bit more than that. And so it seems like, there's a discrepancy between the present and the past in that particular passage. Another thing, to get back to the ladder of abstraction just a little bit, let's see, lunchboxes half packed while someone yells about missing homework. So having details like who the someone is, or maybe something like, what the lunch consists of, something, the kinds of things that we would actually put in a lunchbox might really be helpful. And it gets it lower on that ladder of abstraction. Which also kind of brings me back to something from the first one. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but in the first one it said, white cabinets line both sides, their clean surfaces reflecting the soft light that filters through the open layout, which to me seems like a strange way to say that, because it's not through the open layout that the light would come. It would come through windows and things like that. And so it's a little bit off. Once again, with the ladder of abstraction, that faint pink stain from that one time the strawberry smoothie exploded, knowing something like who is involved, or even if there really is a faint pink stain, there's not a faint pink stain from a strawberry smoothie that exploded some time ago in my kitchen. But there is one stain in the kitchen that it's not going to know about, which is there was some shimmer and shine nail polish when I can't remember how old a couple of my daughters were, but toddlers still, probably, when that got spilled, and there's a little bit of it on the bottom of one of the cabinets. And so that's the kind of stain that I just was never able to get rid of. A faint pink stain from the one time that strawberry smoothie exploded, that could have been, I don't think a strawberry smoothie would leave a stain. If somebody cleans it up, it's not going to be permanent the way that this makes it sound. But anyway, so those are some things that ChatGPT reproduced. And once again, to get it to write about my kitchen specifically, I've got to give it all of the details. And so I would almost have to do as much work giving it details as I would to write my own paragraph. And so that, I think, is a really important thing. It needs all of those direct details if it's going to be good. And so, or if it's going to be specific to the context that I'm writing about, which in this case is the kitchen. Just oftentimes, as I've read work that's been written by ChatGPT, or maybe some of the other ones as well, I've noticed that, the description is still just general enough that it could apply to just about any situation, or maybe just a certain set of situations, but it doesn't describe it in specific enough detail to pinpoint a particular situation. And when I think about proposal writing, I often ask students to use presents to define a problem that they've observed. And I know sometimes that when I get ones back that say, let's take so-and-so, who is kind of a hypothetical person, and it talks about some of the problems that they have, to try to give that problem some presence. It's not specific to an individual, really. The problem description is still just a little bit on the general side. And so those are some of the telltale signs that the context isn't quite right between the writing and the situation. So to go back for just a moment to how AI actually works, the reason why it produces writing that like that is because, as we all know, it scrapes material from the internet, material that was originally written for a previous exigency. It's not a live exigency, right? And so that may play a role here. AI becomes a stochastic parrot. I like that phrase from a book that I read over the summer called The AI Con, I think is the name of it. But it becomes a stochastic parrot. And so the parrot part is that it's just parroting back language. And the stochastic part is that it does that through algorithms that are calculating statistics. And so, what's the statistical probability that this word is going to follow that previous word? And so it's just parroting material back to us in response to a user's prompt. And then the material also, it is necessarily on the generic side. It would take a lot of work on my end to get it tailored to my needs. And there are times when I think it would be easier for me just to do the writing myself instead of trying to use something to assist me. And this is certainly one of those cases. But with the context problem, to go back to AI has a context problem, especially when we get to the real world. My own writing, there would be a really big context problem if I were to write use AI or delegate to AI a routine letter of recommendation. I have students ask me for letters of recommendation. It happens every year. And I don't want to use AI to write those because AI doesn't know the context. It doesn't really know the student. It doesn't know what they did. But I can use details that I know from my experience with the student. And so I can write a good, accurate letter of recommendation for them. In the classroom, proposals written by AI, I think I just, did I just talk about this? They tend to be highly generic in their formulations of problems and solutions. In the real world, specific problems happen in specific places. And so once again, I'm talking about the context of a proposal. If somebody's trying to get something done, if they're trying to solve a problem, the specifics of what that problem is and where it takes place and how it plays out in a particular context is really important. And AI doesn't seem to be able to address that in a way that would be accurate. In the classroom, AI won't necessarily know or understand what rhetorical tools, were used to help students complete assignments. Students would need to know what presence is and get some practice with it. Presence then becomes a useful tool for making writing decisions. And so that I think is really important too. AI wasn't there when we talked about the assignment or when we did practice with certain tools or made writing decisions. And so sometimes that comes through in the writing if AI was used for it. And so we could talk about this later, but the question becomes, how do teachers address these context problems and how do students address these context problems? And I'd like to put that in an upcoming episode of the podcast. But so for me, I'd like to reflect in more detail on my classroom practices. I want to leverage that context problem because it can be for the benefit of my students. And so what I can do is I can identify some of those gaps to make sure that students are experiencing that cognitive engagement that they need to learn the material, to learn about writing in the case of a writing course, and then be successful. Because of course, AI is a writing tool. I'm sure there are going to be things, or maybe there are things that it will automate for people. Sometimes it takes a bit of work for the user at first, but that is something that I want to continue to reflect on as I'm working on my own classroom practices as well. How can I help students with that? How can I leverage the context gap for that as well? So that's what I have for today. Teaching writing in college socials. Once again, I've got email, teachingwritingincollege@gmail.com. Facebook is Teaching Writing in College. Bluesky is at teachingwriting.bsky.social. YouTube is at Teaching Writing in College. And Mastodon is mastodon.social /@teaching writing in college. I'm just experimenting with a couple of new social media platforms that I think have been getting a little bit of attention. Bluesky, I think, has gotten some attention. Mastodon, I think, is a bit more rare, but I like it, so I have a profile there. And I would love to hear from you. You're welcome to like and follow. And you might also remember that, well, if you're watching this, then you're on YouTube. If you are listening, you're on probably Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But thanks again. I really enjoyed doing these, and I hope you find them helpful and useful. And I know that I am, because it does kind of give me an opportunity to think carefully about what I'm doing in the classroom, what else I need to know. And it helps me refresh my own memory about things that I've read about teaching and about learning transfer. So all of that's really important to me, and I hope you find it useful too. So thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode.